Welcome to Parenthood Unscripted, where honest conversations about raising kids take center stage. I'm your host, Samantha Taylor, speech language pathologist, business owner, and mom of two. Each episode, I sit down with professionals and real parents to talk about the parts of parenting we don't always say out loud, the challenges, the growth, the joy, and everything in between. Whether you're looking for connection, perspective, or simply to feel less alone, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. If you're a parent who wants to feel more connected, supported, and less alone in this parenting journey, I'd love to invite you to our Instagram community. Over on Parenthood Unscripted, I share real conversations, behind-the-scenes moments from the podcast, and honest conversations about raising kids, especially the parts we don't always say out loud. It's a space for perspective, encouragement, and connection with other parents who get it. Come join us.
So excited to have Samantha joining us today. She is a woman I met, oh gosh, probably about a year ago at this point. And the more I've learned about her, I just have become increasingly more impressed. She's not only a business owner, but she's also a mother. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And you're right. I think it was exactly a year ago at the time that we're recording this.
Yeah. I know we've had conversations, but I wanted to use this opportunity just to get to know a little bit about you, about your family, your work, and what led you to become a clarity coach.
Yeah, so I am a mom of a 5.5-year-old son. His name is Griffin. And I have been a single mom since he was 10 months old. And that really was the start of my clarity coach work. I started off before that in a coaching environment. I was actually a health coach. And so it was more so like physical health. And then once my son was born, I just had this realization that I was always putting other people before myself, which I think a lot of women and especially moms can relate to. But it was this like, I truly felt like I was smacked over the head. And I pictured this totem pole. And I realized obviously my son comes like first. But there's also the concept of like, no, the mom comes first because then the son. But still, the son comes first. And I realized if I don't change anything, I'm going to be at the very, very bottom. And so I started to ask myself the questions of like, well, what do I want? How do I want my marriage to be? What do I need to start speaking up about? How do I even like want to speak? What is my voice? So many things. And in doing so, it led to the difficult conversations and it led to a divorce. And I processed a lot of that through strategic journaling. And by doing that, I felt so, heartbroken on one side. I felt like I could physically feel my heart breaking at times, but at the same time, I felt so clear and hopeful and optimistic and happy. And that led to just other people noticing that side of me. They were saying that, the whole glow up moment they noticed, and they were asking me questions and they wanted my coaching for the mental health and the emotional health side of things. And so that, make your mess your message is really applies. And I was able to transition from like physical health coaching to more emotional and mental coaching.
Yeah, I first commend you for being so brave to do that because it's not only terrifying being a new mother, but to make those difficult choices too, and to turn it into something that's so beautiful and helping so many other women. So it's one thing to know, right, that that's what you need to do, but how did you actually do it? How did you kind of have the courage or the strength to be able to take those actions?
Yeah. Do you mean like to actually leave my marriage?
Ah,
Yeah, what a great question. And I think there are two sides of it. There, and this became so clear once I left, but even in my marriage and relationship, there were moments where I knew I things didn't align. There were certain values that were very different, and I just kept waiting thinking that, once, like when we were dating, I was thinking, once we get engaged, he'll change. Once we get married, oh, that's when things will change. Once we have a baby, that's when things will change. And I think that that's why once we had our son, it was like that smack over the face of like, no, Sam, he is not changing, and it is not your job to change him. Like, you should have realized this sooner, but you know, it would be way too much of a lift and weight to carry to continue forward like that. And so I realized within myself that there were always those little clues of the moments that I should have said something and I should have stuck my ground and, you know, realized my worth and been less afraid of being alone in certain moments or whatnot. And then also, I realized it was the moment, it was the day that I actually, funnily enough, the night that it was, I had already told my ex that I wanted to separate, and he actually moved down to Florida. So he does not live in the area. And the night that he was moving down to Florida, I was hosting a workshop for someone. And so that was the epitome of like, part of me is like thriving, and the other part of me, like, I went home and he was no longer there. And we oddly left on like amicable terms, like semi-friendly, but I was like, I came home and like the house is completely different. However, my friend left me a voice message and she was like, how did you know? And it was at that moment that I realized, while I had all those little nudges along the way, I had that glimpse of clarity. And I don't think I ever had that. It was always those little nudges with fear of, yeah, but, and what if? And through it was journaling, I think that I was able to see a vision, and it wasn't super clear. Like, I had no path of like, this is who I'm going to date, or this is what my job will be, or anything like that. But just having that glimpse of a clear vision of what life could be and what I deserved, and more so how I wanted to feel, and knowing that that wasn't what I was currently feeling, and that wasn't going to happen. That, I think, was the fine line of like, that was the thing that made me leave.
Yeah, I resonate with that pretty deeply. So I had somewhat of a similar experience with my older son. Um, we were very young when we got pregnant, and I kind of had that thought in my head too. You know, we're young, but we're gonna get married. Things will change. I
Yeah.
got pregnant. Things will change. My son was born. Things will change, but they never did. And we ended up separating when he was about a year old. But throughout that time, I realized that children have a way of really highlighting those kind of sticky areas that aren't really working. And so for us, I I wish I would have had the clarity. I think it was fear that got me out of the relationship. Thankfully, all worked out well. I'm with an awesome man now. But in the time, I wish I would have had something like what you were talking about with the clarity and the journaling. Because while we don't know what's on the other side of these decisions, we can feel a lot more comfortable and confident in trusting our gut in those. Because that is something that I'm really passionate about, is trusting your gut and kind of taking that leap of faith and knowing that ultimately things are going to work out in whatever way. But I love that you were able to start that journaling and reach that clarity. So what kind of drew you to journaling? Is it something you kind of stumbled upon, or how did that really start? Because I know that is such an integral part of what you do.
Yeah. So I used to journal, but in the sense of waking up and doing morning affirmations or gratitude lists, right? And so things that felt good, but they didn't really influence my day besides that 1 hour where I was like, yay, I'm a bad bitch, right? Or like, I'm attracting so much money or whatever. And it wasn't until I had my son and I was just so overwhelmed, feeling like I was dropping all of the balls of motherhood, owning a business, having a super messy house. And I was living in North Carolina in the Outer Banks at that time. So I was away from family and all the things. And so I remember there was this one night where I felt overwhelmed. That was like the biggest word, but I didn't know how to vocalize it. And so I was sitting on the couch next to my ex-husband, well, then husband. And I was like, I'm just going to go journal. I'll be right back. And I took a spare notebook that I had and I locked myself in our spare bedroom because I didn't know if I was going to cry. I didn't know what was going to happen. And I just started venting. That's mostly what it felt like. I didn't go in there with like a set of prompts or anything, but it was just venting. And I realized that while venting, I didn't try to solve anything. It was truly just, this is what's going on. And at that moment, my husband had already said, let's move back to your hometown because I know that would make you happy. And I knew that that would make me so happy. And we did end up doing that. But I knew that that would not make him happy. And that was going to be an issue. And so I jotted that down. And by the end of the journal entry, I realized that it felt so good just to have an outlet where I wasn't trying to solve because I am a fixer. I'm a problem solver. I'm that type of person. And for the first time, like ever, I wasn't the positive Pam. I allowed myself to feel whatever. And then, so that was like the real start of it. And then when I got home, I went to therapy. And in between sessions, I would journal, mostly because again, I didn't know how to vocalize that much. And I feel like I need to think through a lot of things before knowing how it is that I feel. And it slows my brain down. Like I even speak slower when I talk about journaling. And so that's what it was for me. It was really just an outlet to be like, wait, how do I feel about what he said? Or how do I feel about how I showed up in this situation? And so that's how it started, was making journaling more personal for me. I never once used a prompt because that just seemed really surface level for me. I always applied it to something that I learned about myself in therapy, or, an argument that we never really fought, but, something that was said that stirred up my emotions. And then afterwards, I remember watching Virgin River. And do you watch that TV
Love it.
show?
Yeah.
So good. And I just was so inspired by Mel and Jack's relationship. And that triggered a lot of my prompts. I was like, whoa, imagine like if I was in a relationship like Jack, or whether they have those types of conversations. And so I took anything that stirred an emotional response in me, and that became my journal entry.
That is incredible because we are feeling all of these things at all times. They're just kind of swirling in there. And it almost feels like we're passive to or victim to those feelings. So it gives you that way to kind of get it down on paper and process through it without judgment. And I love that. I'm also a fixer. I think it's a Sam in us. But it's nice to just give yourself that space just to kind of, I like to like word vomit or
Yeah.
brainstorm just to get those thoughts out of your head. Cause then it's like you can kind of reach that clarity, but also figure out, oh, do I need to do anything with this? Or did I just need to get it out? So that is incredible. And you kind of touched on this, but like a lot of mothers feel like they should be able to do it all, right? Show up at work, be present at home, and then never drop a ball. And there's always 15,000 balls. What beliefs do you think keep women stuck in that cycle?
Mm. So good. There are a few main beliefs that I think keep moms, especially in that should cycle, but especially the I should be able to do it all. Sometimes it's the belief that if I don't do it all, and in fact, that's a great question to ask yourself of if I don't do it all, then what? And the beliefs that I see, especially when I'm coaching someone one-on-one, what ends up coming up is that if they aren't the one to be super present at home and, the PTA mom and the one advancing their career and, a loving wife, then they fear that they won't be anything at all. They think that their kids won't love them, or they might as well be a bum on a rock, right? If they're not advancing in their career, then they're doing nothing. It's like this black and white mentality pops up all over the place. And so they default to this hyper masculine energy and this hyper achiever, and they go, go, go because of that fear that if I take a beat, if I rest, then the opposite must be true. So that's a really big one. And then also the fear that, or the belief, I should say, that their value is attached to doing it all. And there's so much that is attached to that, like comparison mode. If you see another mom friend doing that, you think you should be able to do it, you know, although we don't know anything about that person's life or how she's able to do it, if she has a house cleaner, if she or house manager, anything like that. But the value of, if I'm unable to be present and do well at work and all these, they like cross off all my to-do lists and grocery shop, or even like on a smaller scale, I order a lot of groceries. Like I pretty much exclusively order groceries because I don't want to take my son to the grocery store, because I don't want him to ask me for a million things. And, to me, it's wasting time in that way. But I could judge myself and say, why am I not able to do that? It might be good to get my son out to do that. And so I see that a lot in people too. And it's that belief that if others are doing this, I should, and that I'm not worthy enough, or a lot of people think, I know that I'm deserving of, with what's on the other side of doing it all. But if I'm not the one actually physically doing it all, then I can't have it all, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And it's so tough because I think society has done so many beautiful advancements, but a lot of women also still get held in that I am the coordinator of the home, but I'm also the money earner, but I'm also the chauffeur or what have you to all the
Mhm.
extracurriculars. And there's nothing wrong with giving yourself grace and asking for help. So like ordering groceries, or for example, we have a cleaner that comes once a month to do all the things I hate to do. Like you will never see me clean a baseboard or a ceiling fan. And so it's giving yourself that grace to say, you know what, I can't do this all alone. I do need help, and not judging yourself for it, because I don't, if we do it all, then there's nothing left over for us too. So, and that's something I see a lot with the parents I work with, is their whole identity kind of gets wrapped up into being the mom or into being the doer. And then when it comes time to figure out who they are, there's no energy left, or there's no time left. And so that can be really, really depleting, and also really depressing too.
Yeah.
It's so so tough to kind of balance that. So I'm curious, like with you, was there anything that you needed to kind of unlearn, or any beliefs that you had to challenge within yourself, especially with becoming a mother?
Yeah. I would say the biggest one is people pleaser. And I think that that definitely applies to being a mom too, I'm learning. But it started with, I mean, going through my divorce. And I think this applies even if you're not going through marriage struggles. It can apply in any sort of relationship. Just asking yourself the question of, where am I staying quiet to keep the peace? And I realized I was doing that in so many different areas. And I specifically targeted in my journal entries the areas where I knew that I didn't like the way that I was showing up as myself. Like there were specific situations where I remember feeling like I was a tiny little mouse in a room. And in the moment, I knew, I was like, I don't like that I'm being so quiet, but I don't even know what I would say. Like, I can't even contribute. And so, just questioning, who is it that's in the room with you at that point? What are you protecting yourself from? Now, looking back, what would you say if you could say anything at all? Just kind of seeing it from all perspectives. And so, people pleasing from the sense of staying quiet around certain people, potentially it is, in one of your relationships. But then also parenting, I still don't know that I'll ever forget. I was in Target and I was shopping with my son. Again, a reason that I don't love going to stores, but I was with my son. I think he was like 3, but we were in the clothing aisle, which, surprise, they always put right next to the toy aisle. And my son wanted to ride one of it's like a ride on toy. It was like a bumblebee. And I was like, sure, you can ride on it, but we are not buying this, you know? So I was being the fun mom, letting him, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, he's so cute riding that through the store. Lo and behold, he wanted to buy it. And I was like, no, no, no. And then at the very end, I eventually let him buy it because I was like, I don't want to deal with a meltdown. And there are so many instances, even like me giving him chocolate before bed because I didn't want to deal with a meltdown. And I think that it's a fine line between, am I doing certain behaviors because I don't want to deal with the meltdown and I'm trying to keep the peace and giving in, and or am I doing these things because I truly don't care, because I truly, you know, it is a fun thing and I don't mind spending extra money. Although that bumblebee, the reason why it stings so much is because it was a $30 toy. It wasn't like $3. This was like an actual gift. I'm like, why? Why? I look back and I'm like, this, and my son never even wrote it because he was too big for it. There's so many aspects to that where I'm like, come on, Sam, do better. So anyways, yeah, people pleasing with my ex-husband, people pleasing, even like in family situations with my son. And I really love digging into that because it's uncomfortable. And I always say that journaling can feel like a relief, but before it does, it takes bravery to go there. And it takes bravery and courage to see yourself for the not great moments and for those uncomfortable emotions, and then to see yourself through it. And I always end my journal entries with the clarity and action. Like, now that I am clear on this, what can I do so that you don't just sit in that emotion? There's an outcome. But yeah, people pleasing is the biggest belief that I've had to work through.
I love that bumblebee example because I feel like it illustrates it perfectly. I always call myself a recovering people pleaser, so I resonate with that as well. And the biggest thing that I've kind of taken from going through the recovery process of people pleasing is it's minor discomfort now that saves us from extended discomfort later, right? Because it's
Mhm.
like it is uncomfortable to tell someone no or to stick that boundary or to do something that might upset someone, but we are doing it at the self-preservation or with self-preservation, right? Because if not, then we are sacrificing ourselves again
Yeah.
and again and again. And so it's just such an important thing is to really work on, does this resonate with me? Is this something that I want to do, or am I doing it just to appease someone else? And I think that's such a great example with how it shows up, not even just in our day-to-day life, but with our children, how we parent. So I love
Yeah.
that. Um, so I was wondering, because you work with a lot of successful women, for the mom listening right now who looks successful on the outside but feels overwhelmed, disconnected, or like she's losing herself, what would you want her to know?
I first would want her to know that she's not alone, and she probably knows that because, you know, she hears podcasts like this, and, you know, she knows that other people are going through this, but it still feels isolating. And I think that it will feel isolating, and you might even play the victim card until you allow yourself to actually feel it. And again, this is where I say it takes bravery and courage because you're already overwhelmed. So why would you offer yourself to feel more overwhelmed by facing it? But that to me is how you move through the emotion. And it's how you uncover why that emotion is still there. It's how you uncover the root belief that's keeping you in that cycle. And if it's not overwhelm, you know, it's likely stress or addiction to like always having a to-do list. You come home from work and you're just thinking about what you didn't do at work and what's left to do, or you're planning tomorrow's to-do list. And it's always like, why can I not turn off my brain? And so journaling might seem like one more thing, but allowing yourself to actually face it and question it and see it from different perspectives will allow you to, yes, feel the emotion, but then when you feel it, it allows yourself to move through it quicker and come out on the other side with not only clarity of like, okay, this feels better. This is what I actually want, but also an action plan. And I know a lot of women, especially listening to this podcast, are problem solvers. And what I often see is that we experience a big feeling or problem or goal even. And as problem solvers and fixers and people pleasers, we jump to the solution. But when we jump to the solution, we're missing the messy middle of why haven't what we tried before, why didn't that stick? And why are we like continuously going in this circle? So that's where journaling and facing the fear will actually be super beneficial for you. And it only takes like 5 minutes a day, a few days a week. So it's not that big of a commitment to really feel the relief that I know she's looking for.
Yeah, yeah. And kind of a part two to that. So we do the journaling, we have all this really, really, really wonderful information. And I know a lot of it is just do what you need to do, but how do you do that? How do you, when you're working with women, what is kind of the progression from journaling to action?
Yeah, so there's two different ways that I approach this. One way, and I actually have a free resource if you want to include it. It's called the Calm Mind Blueprint. So this is where you start journaling, and it's 5 prompts. So you start journaling through awareness, and then it takes you through very specific prompts, but they're personal enough where you apply it to your own situation, right? It's not just write about a sunny day. So it's applied to you. And then by the end, the very last prompt is a micro action step. And so you get to create your own action steps. And what I mean by micro is, you know, speaking of to-do lists, something that's always on my to-do list is making my own dentist appointment. But a micro step is just writing down the phone number of my dentist's office, because my dentist appointment has been on my to-do list for 3 months. Or even more relevant for me right now, ordering myself contacts. That's been on my list for, oh my gosh, I've been wearing the same 2-week contacts for 2 months. Anyways, and I haven't reordered, right? And so writing down the phone number or writing down the website or whatever, and then picking a date to actually call or a date to actually order the contacts and then doing it. So it's really 3 different steps. Or if you want to actually test out taking your kid. Also, a lot of the judgment, I'm like, I have 1 kid. So many of you women out there have more than 1 and you're doing this. Anyways, if you want to test out taking your son to Target, what day do you want to do it? What do you want to buy at the store just to test it out? Maybe you just go through the dollar section or whatever, and then you duck out of there. So coming up with a very specific plan. And the next way that I approach this, especially with a private client, is if you're able to identify a belief with that journaling, the next part of that would be coming up with a new belief. And that is more nuanced and whatnot. And the action step for that looks a little bit different, and it's a little bit more integration into your life. But a tip for anybody that is able to get to that, a new belief, is take the action, like say what you want to say or do what it is that you want to do, and witness the person's reaction. Because so many times that is the freedom that you need, because their reaction, like my son, once I started testing it out, was like, okay. And he had 0 meltdown. And I was like, what? You really don't care that I just said no? And it was so validating. Or to actual grown-ups, I would say what I needed to say, and they said nothing. I was like, wait, you weren't mad that I just said that? And another time I was on a meeting and I felt like I was being very direct and, nice about it, but very direct. And the feedback that I heard afterwards through the grapevine was that I was sweet. And I was blown away, because I was like, in no way, shape, or form did I intend to be sweet. I thought, if anything, she might have said I was a little bit harsh or rude. And I was like, it's just so validating to see somebody's reaction when you show up in the way that you want, and not always. And then that's something that you can journal on, but seeing the reaction when you show up the way that you want is a really interesting experiment.
Yeah, there's two things. I mean, you're saying really profound, incredible things, but two things that really stuck out to me was that micro to-do list. I love that idea because there's so many things for me personally, on my to-do list that feel daunting. And so
Yeah.
even writing down the phone number or making an action plan or whatever it might be is really empowering because then it's like, oh, wait, I am making progress to it. So it's taking this big daunting thing and breaking it down. So it is making progress and not beating myself up that's like, ugh, carrying it over to another day or oh, I'm
Yeah.
carrying it over to another week. I'm gonna have to try that. I have about 4 or 5 things on my calendar right now. I've been shifting literally day by
Yeah.
day. So I'll keep you posted on how that goes. But then the other piece that I really, really loved is that validation piece because I know, again, kind of speaking from experience and then the parents that I've spoken with, a lot of it is the fear of the unknown, the fear of not knowing how someone's going to react or respond. So we build up, our brains are wired to kind of protect us, right? So they think of the worst case scenario and then that almost becomes like, oh, if I say this, this is what they're going to say. Not even considering that they might not care or they might understand or they might be upset, but they'll get over it and that's okay. And the more you get those reps in, the more positive neutral experiences you have under your belt, it makes those harsher experiences a little bit more bearable. And it's helped me realize, you know what? It's not necessarily about me. Like, yes, I want to reflect on, did I say something harsh? Was I rude? Whatever it might be. But if I kind of go through that and it's like, no, I just said something they didn't like, and that's okay. That's really, really empowering for those situations that do feel a little sticky or uncomfortable going forward. So I love, love, love that. Um, and so we kind of touched on this quite a bit throughout, but I wanted to know, um, you create spaces where women don't have to be on. We are on so much in our lives at work, as a mom, with our partners, sometimes when we're out and about with our friends. And I really love that you create those spaces. But when did you realize you didn't want to perform anymore? And how has motherhood played a role in that?
Mm. Amazing question. Yes, such good questions. I realized that I didn't want to be on a few different times. And I think we all feel that, where it's just like you get to the end of the day and you crash, right? And so there were certain moments like that. And then there were also certain moments where I was doing a certain task where I was like, the dread feeling of, I don't want to do this, or the should feeling, but it's the should times 10, like, I should be doing this, and the judgment for not wanting to do that. So that's really the stem of it. And so one was a year ago. I felt like I should be posting on social media. And I hit my breaking point because I had been posting every single day for, well, not every day, take a few days off, but for 12 years at that point. And I was like, nope. So I went on a social media hiatus, and it was just the best thing ever, as everyone says who does a hiatus. But anyways, that was one of the first moments where I actually felt like I turned off. And for me, turning off means going back to those expectations, turning off expectations for yourself. I did not put any expectations on myself to show up. And I love thinking about what expectations do we think others have for us. And I did feel like after showing up for 12 years, people expect me to show up. People expect to see my son, right? People expect to know what I'm having for breakfast, back to my fitness days, right? And so I released those expectations. And so that was me being able to turn off. And then also, this past December, I was in this phase where I have my own podcast, and it just started to feel so scripted. And it was because I was so attached to the outcome. And the outcome that I wanted was I wanted my listeners to feel supported, which was I really want them to download this, which matched the episode title, or I wanted them to work with me, or I wanted to direct them places. And so I was using Claude. I love Claude for AI. I was using Claude, and I was like, okay, here's my theme. Here's the stories I want to share. So it was authentic, but I was like, help me create an outline. And then when I was actually recording, it felt so like hi, my name is Sam. I don't know, like so scripted and it inauthentic, and I hated it. And what made my podcast thrive in the beginning was me like messing up on air and like making fun of myself and just like at the very beginning of my podcast, I had somebody ring my doorbell, which like no one ever comes to my door, but someone rang my doorbell, and it was a someone collecting money for bees to like save the bees. And I kept that whole thing in. I edited out the long pause, but I kept it in, and people still talk about that to this day. That was years ago. So like I wanted to bring back the authenticity. And for me, that was turning off. It was like, no, I'm done scripting myself. And it kind of felt similar to the social media hiatus. I'm like, I'm done showing up a certain way because I think that's what people want, but also because it's what I want. And so I started detaching myself from any outcome. And that has been a huge game changer for me in my business. I've launched something new and I've had more signups than ever because I did not care what the outcome was. And then also as a mom too, I've detached from people pleasing most of the time, still working on it. But my son is able to, he has a meltdown and I can support him through it. And he works through it so much faster because I detached from any expectation that I have for myself and that I think he has from me.
I love that so much. And I think, yeah, being authentic to who you are and what you want is so important. I have absolutely loved our conversation today. So I'd love for you to share where people can find you and anything you kind of have in the works right now.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. I'm not super active per my social media hiatus, but my Instagram is at samantha.s.says. I do post 2 podcast episodes a week at Beyond Awareness. That's the podcast episode. And the Thursday episodes are always journal entries using my strategic approach, not just gratitude. And then what's in the works right now, I do private coaching for anyone who really does want to tap into the beliefs beneath the cycles and stress and overwhelm that you might be feeling. And then I also have the Leaders Table, that is an in-person networking dinner group. And we also do belief work as well. We have one virtual call and then a monthly spotlight for a member too. And that we host it in Batavia. So it's for the people in between Buffalo and Rochester that want to be a part of something, but don't necessarily want to make the drive and want to be, again, a part of someone or something that is, so far, everyone is a mom that's a part of it. So we all get it. We're established entrepreneurs. So we all relate to where everyone is at in our careers and motherhood.
Incredible. And I will be sure to link all of those in the show notes for people to check you out. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. This has been an absolutely incredible episode. And there's so many gems in this that I'm so excited to share.
Oh, thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Parenthood Unscripted. If today's conversation resonated with you, please share it with another parent who might need it. You can follow along on Instagram at Parenthood Unscripted for updates, clips, and future guest announcements. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and I'll see you next time.